Elden Ring's seemingly endless supply of loot never ceases to amaze me. The game is simply filled with some extremely strong weapons and items, including legendary ones that might very well change how you play the game. Today we're gonna take a look at even more such weapons and items, but do keep in mind that there might be some slight spoilers I will discuss about, since quite a few of these will be found a bit later into the game. Let's begin with the Bloodhound Fang, which is an amazing greatsword, not just early on but also later on, and it comes with some really powerful abilities. Now you get this through a side mission quite early on in the game over here at the Mistwood Ruins. Once you reach this place for the very first time, you will hear a wolf howl, and this is basically the trigger for that side quest. Once you heard it, head back over at the church and speak with Kale about it, as he's gonna give you a bit more info as well as how to summon a special character. So he's gonna give you access to a special emote of a finger snap, which is why you're gonna want to go ahead and equip it. Once you've done that, head over back at the ruins and use the finger snap to summon Blade, possibly one of the coolest characters in Elden Ring. And he's gonna tell you about a certain character that you have to defeat. So to do that, pretty much head over right here just south of that region. You likely even know about this place because it's going to put you through a pretty interesting mini boss fight. It should be pretty easy because you can also like summon Blade and also your own summon, and between these two the boss should be really easy, point at which you can collect the really awesome curved sword from its body. And this is a really amazing one, especially for any character that uses dexterity and strength, because it's the perfect counter-attack weapon. Its heavy attack is pretty much a cross slash immediately followed by a jump back, which will get you out of harm's way. It's again a perfect tool for that, but you can follow up with another attack after that. So if you perform that and then quickly follow up with a heavy attack, your character will kind of like go into a mist and move forward really fast with an uppercut slash that will deal even more damage. Its dodge attack is also very useful. Following a dodge, if you use a quick attack, you're going to perform a very fast attack with a great sword. So despite being oversized, it's a very quick weapon to have if you're using it properly. Now the next one is going to be a talisman, also quite close to the starting areas, and will provide some much needed heals. You're gonna find it in the Weeping Peninsula, specifically right here onto the southwestern part of the island. Here there's a tower but also some enemies patrolling, so simply ignore them and make your way at the top, and also maybe take down the enemy controlling the ballista. Now here is where you will encounter a treasure chest, but if you get it, you are gonna get trapped and sent to a different location, which is going to be the royal capital on a different part of the map. And here there's going to be a point that you can save right before a huge boss that will absolutely obliterate you. But guess what? You don't have to fight that boss. Simply head over to the right side, try to like sneak around or just like do it before he wakes up, and then grab the chest over here, which is going to give you access to this really awesome talisman. Now the Blessed Dew talisman is going to give you a permanent heal over time, which comes in very useful, especially early on. It's not going to make a huge difference if you're like me and have a rather large chunk of HP, especially if you're like towards like the ender part of the game, but it can be extremely useful early on, even more so if you combine it with the Flask of Wondrous Physic and just like combine the heal over time effects, which is going to like just get you to full HP in no time. But moving on to number 3, let's talk about a really awesome early on meteoric katana that can perform a high AoE range vacuum against multiple targets. You can find it actually pretty close to where we found that meteoric staff in the swamp region in Caelid. Pretty much from the same waypoint, head over just a bit west onto the main road where you will find these ruins over here. Make your way all the way to the back until you see this kind of like pathway leading underground. Now do note that you're gonna have a really rough time in this area, so I highly advise you to like just pick these targets off unless you want to like go through this nightmare like how I did. But once you're done with that and clear the enemies, you can simply open the room in the back and you're gonna get access to this chest that gives you the meteoric katana. Now I kind of like this one, especially for my character. It has a special move which is basically its heavy attack. When you perform this attack into the ground, you're going to like suck everybody in a very large AoE, pretty much pulling in all targets and also dealing a little bit of damage. Now this one also scales with intellect, so this is probably gonna be best suited for something that's a bit of a hybrid, maybe a hybrid between a spellcaster and a samurai, which does sound quite a bit interesting, because once you do that, you're gonna perform this attack, which deals a bit of damage, sucks enemies in, but also staggers them, or at the very least interrupts them momentarily, which means you can quickly follow up with attacks, so this is quite a nice weapon to have against large groups of enemies. But moving on to number 4, let's talk about an even crazier weapon that you can get a little bit later on in the game, and that's gonna be a different katana that actually is even better for a spellcaster. You can find it pretty much here in these like caves or tunnels, so to speak, at the border with Caelid on this side of the map. Pretty much following the church just nearby, you're gonna have to make your way into this like abandoned village, past the graveyard, jump down, and you are going to find the tunnels. Once there, just make your way at the bottom, and here is where you will have to fight a boss inside of this room, which is why I recommend to go into the next one with the pot boy, activate the Site of Grace to make things easier, and then jump onto the boss. Now, I'm not gonna spoil anything about the boss fight, but I will give you 2 pointers. A, just use bleeds, they are extremely effective here, and B, use jump heavy attacks. Trust me, you're gonna thank me after this. But once you're done with that, you are going to get the really awesome, well, Moon Veil Katana. Now, this is a pretty interesting choice right here because it has a pretty huge intellect requirement of about 23, so you're gonna use this around the middle part of the game unless you like farm runes, and it's going to perform some magic spells too, so it's a good for hybrids in there. Basically, your unsheath attack will now also perform this like magical slash that kind of travels a little bit forward and deals some additional damage. I think that I'm gonna definitely switch to a more like hybrid samurai after this because from the looks of it, it's just absolutely insane. Coming up at number 6, let's talk about one of my favorite possible weapons in the game, and I'm kinda glad that I went with this route. Essentially, it's called the Sword of Night and Flame, a full-on legendary that does not have any requirement in terms of quests or like just taking down bosses. It's actually a reward from a chest right here at the Caria Manor, which is quite north of what you're used to. So you're gonna have to progress quite a bit into the game. From this point on, simply hug your left side and go into the main area of the manor and all the way right here at the walls section. What you have to do in this case is to go over these walls. So basically just do what I do, completely ignore these enemies, take your first to the left and then your next one to the right, and here where you see these barracks, jump onto them from the wall. From this point on, you're gonna want to do another jump all the way until you see this like pathway or ladder leading all the way into the basement, and here is where I found this chest, and of course here's an earlier footage of it providing the Sword of Night and Flame, possibly one of the strongest spell weapons in the game, or well, pretty much any weapon in the game. Now this comes with 2 very overpowered spells that will scale up even more if you have a lot more intellect and maybe a bit of faith too, I believe. But basically the first spell, you know what it is because you fought against the second boss and you hated that spell. Well, you now have it and it's just as amazing. It pretty much like destroys enemies, and even more so, I've seen it reach over 1400 damage with a really unoptimized early on build. The second ability is kind of like this flame attack, which you can perform, but it's a little bit more close range. It deals even more damage out of the gate, about like 800, and again with a completely unoptimized build, making and trivializing pretty much most of the early on fights in the game, while also making you look extremely cool. And by the way, there's a final weapon in here called the Troll Knight Sword, a double-hander that also comes in with a huge amount of damage and a pretty interesting ability. Again, if you're playing something like a paladin, I think that this is going to be absolutely amazing. So you find it at the same Caria Manor, but you have to take the elevator from the same walls, which will bring you to the other side of Grace, onto the eastern part of that manor. And once you're there, you're gonna pass a small area and you're gonna reach this one with the knight, and of course a bunch of enemies that you have to clear up beforehand because they are annoying spellcasters. Once you've defeated the troll, you're gonna be able to loot that sword from its body, and it looks pretty much amazing. Of course, I kinda am in love with double-handed swords that come with special effects. This one comes with a powerful roar that you can perform, but of course it scales up with a ton of intellect and quite a bit of strength and dexterity too in there, so you're going to want to like prioritize these abilities. This is it though, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next video.